my name is Kenny Lee, and I am the manager of World Anti-Doping Agency, Asia and Oceania office. This is my great pleasure to have an opportunity to make a presentation about anti-doping during the 2022 World Archery Academy Coaching and Technical Seminar. My understanding is that now I'm recording this video, but I will join the live Q&A session at the end of this presentation. So if you have any questions for this presentation or any other anti-doping matters or rules, regulations, please feel free to ask me when you see me. Okay, today I have two chapters. The first one is the introduction to the anti-doping system, especially for coaches. And then I will try to explain those anti-doping rules. And then Q&A will be followed. For the first chapter, I would like to explain what is the code. Code is World Anti-Doping Code, and how the code protects you, your athlete health, and clean sports. And then identify the roles and responsibilities of the World Anti-Doping Agency, which is called WADA, and the different types of anti-doping organizations. And then I will talk about the anti-doping activities under the code. What are the anti-doping activities under the code? And lastly, I will explain how anti-doping practices and requirements are value-based. Firstly, WADA's vision is, of course, a world where all athletes can participate in a doping-free sports environment. And our mission is to lead a collaborative worldwide movement for doping-free sports. And I would like to introduce a little bit more about my organization. Firstly, about funding. Totally, we have an annual budget about 28 million US dollars. And this budget comes from half from the sports movement and half from the government. Sports movement means the International Olympic Committee. So IOC funded 50% of our annual budget, and the rest of 50% of budget comes from the government. So we are all from Asia. So all the Asia government actually contributed their annual contribution to WADA, and the contributions amount based on the GDP per capita as well as the sports indicator, which how many athletes attended the Olympic Games and how many athletes attend the Asian Games or whatever. So the contribution of the government in Asia depends on the GDP per capita and also the sports indicators. And how about locations? Our headquarters are based in Montreal in Canada, and we have 4 regional offices located in Latin America, Africa, Asia, and Europe. Now I am living and working in Tokyo. So Asia office is located in Tokyo, and I'm from Korea. And then about our staff, we have totally about 140 employees now. And let's look at the areas of the core activities of WADA. Firstly, if we look at the top, of course, we develop the rules and enforcement. And we also have some program development programs which support the rules application to the anti-doping organizations. And also one of the main activities of our agency is compliance and monitoring. We are monitoring those anti-doping activities of World Archery also and your national anti-doping organizations or whatever. And the other activities, let me explain later. And what is the World Anti-Doping Code? Code is the core regulatory document that governs the anti-doping system. So it is globally recognized and ensures that anti-doping rules and programs implemented consistently across the world. The regulatory document is a very important meaning. It's very much important concept, I think. So what regulatory document means and what would sports be without regulatory document? Have you ever thought about the sports without any rules or without any regulatory? What is going to be happen? Imagine a football stadium. This is very familiar to us. Or you can imagine your archery field. This is a very normal football stadium, but what if there were no boundary lines? Imagine there is no boundary lines in the football area, in the football field, in the soccer field, in soccer stadium. Do you think it's going to be a fair play or even safe when play the football? Just imagine there is no boundary of the football stadium. And what about the size specifications for the nets? Imagine the nets for the A teams is smaller than the B teams. Or you can imagine the archery when you shot, if the target is different size. You think it's also fair sports, or you think it's even safe? Well, I don't think so. And what about the uniform rules? If there is no uniform rules, look at the right side. It's going to be very complicated. And also, I don't think it's going to be safe. And what about no age divisions? You think it's going to be a fair play in sports? So rules and regulatory documents are fundamental to sports. We need rules so we can all participate in sports fairly. This is very important concept. And anti-doping rules, this is like competition rules. This is also sports rules, help us protect athlete sporting performance so we can live in sports we see. Now let me briefly introduce who then created the regulatory document code. Who made the code? This code was actually made by the collaboration with the sports community, the governments of the world, and anti-doping organization. So when the currently 2021 World Anti-Doping Code applied, when this code has been updated and revised, the actual sports community means, for example, World Archery, they provide their comments when the rules updated. And your governments also probably sent the comments when the World Anti-Doping Code updated or revised. And anti-doping organizations, your country may have your own national anti-doping organizations, and also which is called NADO. Also, they probably provide the feedback or comments when the current rules had been updated. So all the sports community, governments, and anti-doping organizations actually contributed and created the World Anti-Doping Code. And then who accepts the code? Another important topic. Who accepts the code? Actually, the entire Olympic movement, as well as by various sports bodies such as National Olympic Committee or National Anti-Doping Organizations accept the code. As I mentioned, of course, World Archery accepted the code, and your national anti-doping organizations, and also your National Olympic Committee accepts the code. So if you are visiting WADA's website, there's a list who accept the code, and among the list of international federation, of course, World Archery is there. And if you are more interested in, please try to find out your national anti-doping organization, your National Olympic Committee, all accepted the code and they are in the list. And also, if you go to the World Archery website, if you click the, I think it's if you click the Clean Sports, you can see the World Archery's anti-doping rules. If you are interested in, please go to the website of World Archery and try to see what is anti-doping rules for the World Archery. So the anti-doping rules of each signatory must be approved by WADA to ensure they are aligned with the code. And those anti-doping rules matter. It is important that you are aware of the ones that apply to you and your athlete support. This means that even though I mentioned that your national anti-doping organization also adopted a code, and your national anti-doping organization have their own national anti-doping rules, and World Archery also has World Archery's anti-doping rules. But actually, those rules of each signatory means World Archery is also the signatory, and your national anti-doping organization is also the signatory. And those rules must be reviewed and approved by the WADA to ensure that they are in line with the code. So no need to worry that the rules might be different. No, the core rules, the mandatory rules, like what types of anti-doping rule violations are there and the sanctions in eligibility period, those kind of mandatory rules are all same. Don't worry. So yes, the code applies to you and athlete support personnel, mainly the coach. And I said the code applies to you, athlete support personnel. And let's look at who is considered an athlete support personnel. The code defines athlete support personnel as firstly any coaches and trainer. So you are of course the athlete support personnel based on the code definition. So if my presentation says ASP or athlete support personnel, that means the coaches can be included in the athlete support personnel. So we remember that according to the code definition, your position is athlete support personnel. And there are different levels of types of athlete highlighted in the code. Firstly, international level athlete, national level athlete, recreational athlete. And you should remember two very important things. Whose anti-doping rules you are under and which type of athlete you are working with. I said there are international level athlete and national level athlete. So you should be familiar with whose anti-doping rules you are under, which means you are the World Archery's anti-doping rules under, or you are the national anti-doping rules under. You should be familiar with what type of athlete you are working with. Of course, you can check your national anti-doping organization and World Archery that your athlete belongs to the international level or national level. For example, easily speak, if your athlete is going to participate in the World Archery sanctioned competitions like World Championships or series of World Cup competitions, that means your athlete now the international level athlete, and probably mostly World Archery's anti-doping rules will be applied. And if your athlete is going to join the national sports festival or national championships, that means your athlete can be categorized as national level athlete and your national anti-doping rules will be applied. But as I mentioned, the core rules, the core articles are all same because all the rules have been reviewed and approved by the World Anti-Doping Agencies. The core rules are all same. Uh, Brief quiz. Athlete A is a valuable player participating at the next Olympic Games. He would like to find out more about anti-doping rules for the Games. Which organization website should he check with? Firstly, IOC's rules. Secondly, International Volleyball Federation's rules and National Olympic Committee's rules. Which rules will be applied to this athlete? I mentioned that if your athlete are joining the World Archery sanctioned competitions, the athletes the rules which will be applied to the athlete is World Archery's anti-doping rules. And if your athlete is joining the national competition, the national anti-doping rules will be applied. But this athlete is going to join the Olympic Games. So during the Olympic Games, IOC's anti-doping rules shall be applied. And also during the Asian Games, OCA anti-doping rules also shall be drafted and reviewed by WADA and approved by WADA. Of course, the core rules, mandatory rules, the same. So in this case, these players' rules, actually IOC's rules will be applied. Yeah, the correct answer is IOC's rules. And the next question, which organizations can test athlete? Please select all. Which organizations can test athlete? National Anti-Doping Organization. MEO is major event organizations like IOC or OCA. And international federations like World Archery and your government and Court of Arbitration for Sports, which is called the CAS, and WADA's accredited laboratories. So which organizations can test athlete based on the code? Yes. Of course, your national anti-doping organization can test your athlete. And of course, as I mentioned, during the Olympic Games, IOC anti-doping rules will be applied. That means, of course, MEOs like IOC or OCA can test the athlete. And of course, World Archery can test the athlete during the competition sanctioned by World Archery. So these three organizations can test the athlete. But government does not have any function, any power to directly test the athlete. Also, the Court of Arbitration for Sports does not have, actually doesn't test the athlete, and accredited laboratories actually analyze the samples is the main purpose and their main activities, not the testing the athlete. So the top three organizations can test the athlete. And your roles and responsibilities of the code and all things athletes' rights. As an athlete support personnel, you have roles and responsibilities that outlined in the code. Firstly, let's look at your roles. Your roles includes you should be knowledgeable. Knowledgeable means knowledgeable to the anti-doping rules or whatever. And fostering anti-doping attitudes. This is also very important. You have an attitude for abiding by the anti-doping rules or whatever, and you should complying with anti-doping policies, of course. And your responsibilities include cooperate with the athlete testing program and disclosing information about past anti-doping rule violations, ADLV's anti-doping rule violations. So if you have any past history to commit the anti-doping rule violations, you should disclose it to the anti-doping organizations. And also you should cooperate with the investigations. These are the responsibilities as an athlete support personnel, as a coach, under the code. Another quiz. Which of the following are part of your roles as an athlete support personnel? Firstly, to be knowledgeable of anti-doping policies and rules applicable to athlete support personnel only. And secondly, comply with anti-doping policies and rules applicable to athlete support personnel only. And thirdly, to be knowledgeable of anti-doping policies and rules that apply to you as well as the athlete you support, you're working with. And to lastly, comply with anti-doping policies and rules that apply to you as well as the athlete. Which answer do you think correct? And which of the following are part of your roles and as an athlete support personnel? Yes, the correct answer is the last two options. As an athlete support personnel, everything you should support you should support your athlete directly or indirectly. So by being knowledgeable and complying with rules and policies that apply not only to you, but to your athlete as well. This is a very important concept. You will be able to help your athlete fulfill their anti-doping obligations and compete clean. Uh, Briefly, also, athlete has the rights within the anti-doping system. And if we go to the website, and if our athlete is interested in the Athlete Act, this is available via WADA website. So please feel free to go to WADA website and look at what is Athlete Anti-Doping Rights Act. Okay, secondly, let me talk about the rules. Totally, according to the code, according to the World Archery's anti-doping rules, according to the your national anti-doping rules, according to the OCA anti-doping rules, according to the IOC's anti-doping rules, there are totally 11 types of anti-doping rule violations. So from this chapter, I would like to explain who the 11 anti-doping rule violations apply to and what you need to do to follow the rules. So by the end of this chapter, I hope you can explain the 11 types of anti-doping rule violations, who they apply to, and their associated sanctions also. Yes, as I said, there are totally 11 types of anti-doping rule violations. I think I should explain one by one, even though briefly, because imagine how many types of rule violations can be applied to you. As I said, there are totally 11 types of anti-doping rule violations. Of course, these 11 types of anti-doping rule violations are all applied to the athlete. Athlete can commit anti-doping rule violations, any kind of these 11 types. But think about how many types of anti-doping rules violations can be applied to the athlete support personnel, applied to the coaches. The next slide informs how many types of rules violations can be applied to you. This slide, let me briefly explain. So please listen carefully what types of anti-doping rule violations are currently applied. And think about which rule violations can be applied to you. Firstly, presence. Presence is, of course, can be only applied to the athlete because presence means if an athlete provides sample, the sample's analysis result show that the sample contains include the prohibited substance. So the first types of rule violation, presence is the most often cases for the anti-doping rule violations. My understanding is more than 90% of the rule violation type is the first one, presence. The samples detected the prohibited substance. Of course, you cannot be applied to the first type. And the second type, use. Use means even though the athlete samples have not never include the prohibited substances so far, even though submitted like hundreds of samples during the athlete period. Even though all the analysis are negative, no problem. But later, by like a very concrete evidence by the third parties or the testimony or whatever, if it can be proved that the athlete has used the prohibited substances or prohibited method previously, even though those samples are all negative, this is also can be one of the anti-doping rule violation. Have used the prohibited substances, prohibited method, even though not directly detected from the samples that the athlete provide. So of course, the second type cannot be applied to the athlete support personnel. And the third one is evasion or refusal. This means when the doping control officer notified to the athlete that you are selected and you shall provide us your samples, and the athlete refuse or even evade. This is of course the anti-doping rule violation. Yes, this also cannot be applied to the athlete support personnel because you not going to provide the samples as an athlete support personnel. Where about failures? You may be familiar or may not familiar with where about failures. Where about means which is called a registered testing pool. Where about means those athletes who are included in the registered testing pool, usually very top level of athlete, they shall inform where they are now and where they are staying, where they are practicing. They should inform where they are now for the no advance notice out of competition testing. So if an athlete provided information and doping control officer tried to notify the athlete, however, the information is not accurate, so the doping control officer cannot see the athlete based on the information that the athlete provided. These types of violation, if the three combinations that the doping control office cannot notify to the athlete based on the information of the athlete provided, three combinations within 12 months, this means also the anti-doping rule violation. Of course, this cannot be applied to you. And the rest of 7 cases all can be applied to the athlete support personnel. Tampering, yeah, tampering. Tampering means like during the sample collection, the athlete or athlete support personnel try to like pour some liquid or to the sample code or try to switch the sample code or whatever tampering activities, tampering. And the next type is possession. Possession means the athlete or athlete support personnel possess the athlete the prohibited substances, and then if any doping control officers try to notify the athlete and find out some prohibited substance or whatever, and doping control officer notify in detail the information, this can be also a type of anti-doping rule violation, even though just possess the the prohibited substances, the prohibited method, this can be one type of anti-doping rule violations. Also, if an athlete support personnel possess the prohibited substances or prohibited method, this can be a type of anti-doping rule violation. Of course, this can be applied to the athlete support personnel. Trafficking the prohibited substances, cover up the prohibited substances. This also can be applied to the athlete as well as athlete support personnel. Administration to an athlete can be, of course, administered by the coaches. This, but I'm going to talk about the sanctions. What's the ineligibility period? But the 8 types of anti-doping law violation or administration to an athlete. These are types of anti-doping law violation considered very serious kind of anti-doping law violations. And complicity also can be applied to the athlete as well as the athlete support personnel. Prohibited association means WADA website. If you go WADA website, there is a list of athlete support personnel like a medical or coaches who are currently sanctioned under the anti-doping rule violations, who committed the anti-doping rule violations. And there are lists in WADA website, athlete support personnel's name. But if an athlete goes to the coaches or the medical personnel who are on the list, or coaches go to the coaches who are on the list and consult with athlete performance level or whatever, that means that is the prohibited associations. Also, this type of anti-doping violation can be sanctioned and ineligibility period can be imposed. And lastly, retaliate or discouraging the reporting. If a person would like to report some kind of intelligent information, if an athlete doping and he would like to report these activities to the authority, but try to retaliate or discouraging the person. This is also the last type of anti-doping violations. I try to explain briefly, but I don't know if it's brief or not. So anyway, there are totally 11 types of anti-doping violations. And 7 types of anti-doping rule violations can be applied to the athlete support personnel. Of course, all 11 apply to the athlete. The athlete can receive an anti-doping rule violation for any of the above violations. And now I'm going to talk about a few key points for athlete to remember. The firstly, strict liability rules. Sometimes the athlete during the hearing said, "Oh, I didn't know that because my medical personnel, my team doctor give this substance to me, and I never realized that the medication which my medical personnel, my team doctor provide me includes the prohibited substance." No, this is not an excuse. Yes, of course, the ineligibility period can be reduced, but there is no excuse of the code. So the strict liability is very much important that the athlete and athlete support personnel should remember. No excuse. And I mentioned about the refusal, so always take the test. This is also very important. There is no excuse. Always take the test. This is also very important. No excuse to evade, no excuse to refuse. Even by the religious reason, no excuse. There is cases that an athlete refused for the religious reason, but the athlete was sanctioned. And apply for TUE. If I have an opportunity, let me explain briefly about the TUE. TUE, therapeutic use exemption. This is like an athlete, before an athlete use a medication, they must check its active ingredients against the prohibited lists. And if any of those ingredients are on the list, they need to apply for therapeutic use exemption before using it and permitted to use the prohibited substance. This is the rules, very important rules. If I have a chance, I'll try to explain the therapeutic use exemption later. And of course, the supplements is very important. Prohibited substance can be included even during the manufacturing processes. And also some supplements were actually not very strictly controlled by the government authority. So actually the supplements includes the prohibited substances, but the ingredient does not inform that this supplement includes the prohibited substances. So supplements always should be aware. This many cases are actually caused by the supplements. And lastly, I explained about the importance to submit the very accurate and most up-to-date wearable information. So as I said, if this happens 3 times within a 12-month period, this is anti-doping rule violations. Uh, okay, evasion. I explained the evasion and refusal, not going to the doping control station when notified. These types of anti-doping rule violation will be applied to athlete only or athlete support personnel also. Yes, this one goes to only athlete. How about the complicity? For example, if any rule, anti-doping rule violations directly have a directly relations with testing that goes to the athlete only, like a present, use, evade, or the whereabout failure. But if not directly involved with the sample collection, it can be applied to the athlete as well as the athlete support personnel. So complicity, helping or trying to help cover up an anti-doping violation, this can be applied to athlete as well as the athlete support personnel. And I also briefly mentioned about the retaliations to discourage or retaliate, frightening or seeking revenge for reporting doping to the authorities. Also, this type of ADLV can be applied to athlete as well as athlete support personnel. And prohibited association, working with athlete support personnel who is serving a sanction, who is in the list, included in the list on WADA website. This also can be applied to the athlete as well as athlete support personnel. And using or trying to use a banned substance, this can be applied to only athlete. And possession, having a banned substance in your possession. Also, this can be applied to the athlete support personnel. So if medical or coaches without any justification, if possess the prohibited substances or method, it can be anti-doping rule violations and can be applied to the athlete as well as athlete support personnel. And administration to an athlete, I mentioned this is very seriously considered. And this also can be applied to the athlete as well as athlete support personnel. Lastly, tampering, interfering with the testing or doping control process, like switch the sample or pour the liquid in the sample bottle or whatever. This also can be applied to the athlete and athlete support personnel. I hope my explanation can give you a little bit clear idea what types of anti-doping law violations, and now you can be more familiar. I hope you can be more familiar with anti-doping law violations. I think let's skip this slide because of time limit. And now let's briefly talk about the sanctions. Sanctions vary on a case-by-case basis and are specific to the facts at hand. The information provided from now here is so in general. As mentioned, the sanctions vary on case by case, and I'll just briefly introduce the general one. General. And firstly, presence, use, and possession. Yes. Let me talk about the presence. What's the ineligibility period for the presence? For example, you may be familiar with those steroid, anabolic agent steroid, that is classified as non-specified substances, which is the bottom of the explanation. If a non-specified substance, so the anabolic agent steroid is classified as the non-specified substances. So if an athlete cannot prove that his violation for the non-specific substances is an intentional, if an athlete cannot prove that it was not unintentional, that means a 4 years ineligibility period. If an athlete proved that it was not intentional, then the ineligibility period can be reduced 2 years. But if the athlete cannot prove that the presence of anabolic agent steroid, if he cannot prove that it's unintentional, I'm sorry. If he cannot prove that it's an unintentional, that means normally 4 years ineligibility period. And in the middle, there's a specified substance. Specified substance is like, for example, if an athlete take on cold medicine and the cold medicine includes the prohibited substances, which is mostly called the stimulant. It's mostly classified as specified substances, generally found more easily in over-the-counter medications or in contaminated supplements, and more likely to be used for a purpose other than the enhancement of sports. The basic sanction is 2 years, unless the anti-doping organization can demonstrate that it was on purpose, intentional. So even though these specified substance, over-the-counter substance, like substance from the cold medicine detected, if the anti-doping organization can prove that it was an intentional, then the ineligibility period can increase to 4 years. But generally, if the anti-doping organization cannot prove that it wasn't intentional, then the ineligibility period begins from 2 years. So the period of ineligibility can be reduced further down to a reprimand, depending on the type of substances and athlete degree of fault. In summary, if you dope deliberately on purpose, you are likely to receive 4-year ban from sports. If you can prove that you didn't intend to dope, you may receive a lesser sanction. This is a basic concept of under the current code. Okay. Consider the following story. Athlete X tests positive for oxandrolone. This is non-specified substance which is called anabolic agent. This is prohibited at all times. The athlete claims that he used a contaminated supplement product. However, he is not able to provide any supporting evidence, not even a copy of the receipt. In this case, what type of sanction will he receive? I explained about the intentional, on purpose rule violations and unintentional violations. This is a non-specified substances, and I said if an athlete cannot prove that this is an unintentional, the ineligibility period will go 4 years. So possibly the athlete will receive a reprimand or 2-year ineligibility or 4-year ineligibility period. What do you think the correct answer? Probably and mostly this athlete will receive, yes, you are correct, 4-year ineligibility period because the athlete has received 4-year ineligibility period because he was not able to demonstrate that the anti-doping rule violation was not intentional. And also, another important point is that he cannot prove where is the origin because he couldn't even provide a copy of the receipt or whatever. He cannot even prove the origin of the prohibited substances. So this one, of course, can be considered as an intentional violation. So this athlete received 4 years ineligibility period. I think my time is almost done. So I think it's better to wrap up my presentation, but I still have 10 minutes a Q&A session. So these are all explanation about the anti-doping rule types and what's the ineligibility period will be. As I mentioned, this is the administration. The administration, just one-time violations can go to the lifetime ban if the violation I consider very seriously, and especially the administration related to the protected person. Protected person means like the minor athlete, or then at only the first time a violation can lead to the lifetime ban for the athlete support personnel. Actually, I will share the slides, so I'm recommending you to please read all the slides. And if you have any questions, and actually there is no answer, so if you are wondering what is the correct answers, please feel free to contact the World Archery Asia, and then I will share the answers. So in summary, anti-doping rule violations in place to protect athlete health, of course, and their right to clean, fair competition. And anti-doping rule violations support the value associated with clean sports. And there are totally 11 types of anti-doping rule violations. All 11 apply to athlete, and 7 goes to the athlete support personnel. Actually, all of my slides are from ADEL. ADEL is anti-doping e-learning. ADEL for High Performance Coaches Education Program. This is available via WADA website. Absolutely free course. And very strongly recommend all the coaches please go to WADA website and look at where is ADEL, anti-doping e-learning, and then you can register. And when you register, please select coaches, and then please select your type as level in sports as high performers. Then you can access all the slides that I shared previously. This is a slides from chapter 1, 2, 3, or whatever, but there are totally 13 chapters, and I'm very much strongly recommend all the coaches please log in the Adele and go to the high performance coaches section and please try to read all the 13 chapters, try to answer all the questions, quizzes, very interesting, and then I'm pretty much sure that your athlete will be protected by you under the anti-doping system, under the anti-doping perspective. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope I can see you very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.